looks like we have quorum. We can call this meeting to, well, we're already in order. We're in non-public session.
We went out.
Yeah, we came out of,
Oh, she said we
came out of non-public and we're in public. That's,
Yes, there we go.
all right, Laura, do we have anyone for public comments?
No.
I have one brief public comment. There you go. Okay. Last week, unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend because of the cancellation and the short notice rescheduling to the next day. But I was a little disappointed about how fast we moved forward with proposing getting an engineering study done on the decision that the board made with the Southern School and the Northern School proposal. From what I read of the study, I don't think enough effort has been put into looking at what needs to be done to the current schools, and I think at the very least that needs to be done so that we can justify the position that the board took last week. So I think that's an important component that hasn't been done. If we're going to move forward with proposing that we should add on or possibly even build an entire new school, we need to discuss it, be able to have that discussion with the public that the current facilities don't meet the needs of the district and that they can't be put into a position where they do meet the needs of the district at a reasonable cost.
Thank you. And you're Nick Mosier from Roxbury, yes?
Yes, that was a public comment.
Speaking as the public, sir?
Yeah, I'd like to make a sort of add on to Nick's. I don't think we've done any cost analysis. We've cost the building, but we haven't cost out the employment issues and that type of thing. I was in this hustle quite a while for General Dynamics, and you always had a benefit analysis of the 8 benefits against each other. How much is this gonna cost? What does it save? What are the good ones of these things? What's the bad one of this? So forth. We haven't done that. It's a lot of paper, and I congratulate them for collecting data, but there is no analysis there.
All right. Any other public comment? We'll move on then to matters that require board action. Warrant articles, which are due for 1/14. We have a copy of the present warrant articles in our packet. These are proposed, and we are able to make amendments at this evening's meeting. Article 1, let's skip it for now because budget is the next agenda item. Article 2, to see if the Monadnock Regional School District will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $1,130,000 for renovations to the middle high school. Are there any questions or clarification on this particular warrant article? If not, I'll accept a motion to accept.
What am I looking at here on the
Warrant Article 2.
Warrant Article 2?
This is for renovations to the middle high school.
It's for the temporary buildings, correct?
Temporary buildings, right.
And how much was it?
$1,130,000.
And you're open to discussion?
We need to have a motion first, and then we can discuss.
Move to approve Article 2 as written.
Second?
All right, so that was Scott and Nick. A discussion? Go ahead, Rob.
We discussed this a little bit in facilities, but I would strongly disagree with this being pushed forward. I think we've asked the taxpayers, and are in the process of asking taxpayers a lot in terms of construction. I fear that we may get construction fatigue and not understand how all the different pieces interact. I think a lot of resources did just get spent on the high school. I'm not a fan of the temporary classrooms, I get that. But I think we want to be careful of asking for too much from the taxpayers over a multi-year period.
Nick?
Excuse me for my lozenge here, fighting a cold still. I think it's very important that we keep up with maintaining the infrastructure in the district. I understand that a majority of the board is putting forth a proposing a very drastic, a large change is a better word, I guess, by building new schools. But if the public rejects that, then we still have to maintain the infrastructure that we have. And these changes that are being put forward by the board don't address the middle school, high school anyways. So I think if we get behind in the middle school, high school, then we're going to have to ask for that much more money in the future in order to address the needs there.
Anyone else before Rob? All right, I do have something, and then you can go, Rob.
Go ahead. I was waiting for Rob to go ahead, because I was going after him. But go ahead.
You said you had some.
I do have something. I just want to, I want to point out to the board that if we let this $1 million go, then the tax rate will decrease, and increasing it again after we stop our pattern of having $1 million of construction each year is going to be very difficult for us. So Neil and then Rob.
Well, it's like Rob said, it's $1 million that the building is still standing. You can say you don't like them. A lot of people, I can remember one principal saying it blocked his view of the rest of the parking lot. But it's still there. I don't see why we should spend $1 million. And I understand that Swansea is asking for $14 million. Got a warrant article for $14 million for a firehouse. No. You know, I can remember the selectmen talking here about let's not do big articles together. I guess it didn't happen anymore.
All right, I do have Rob and then Lisa.
I find myself in the unique position of agreeing with Neil to some extent in regards to, how this interfaces with big articles coming on the towns of other nature. But I am inquisitive into my colleagues on the Facilities Committee. Did the Facilities Committee approve this or push this forward? I don't recall a vote.
There were no votes taken at facilities
Well, how
on
did this
warrant
get
articles.
onto this, is my question.
Because there were no votes taken at facilities and the full board had to take it up. Lisa?
So just as a reminder, there is, next year, we do have a substantial amount of an increase in adequacy in the amount, what did I say it was, 1.39 million, 1.4 million? I think it's around 1.4 million. That is one-time money. That is the result of the budget that passed for the biennium. It's the second year of the biennium. And it includes disparity aid grants in that adequacy number, along with increased aid for, and sorry, I'm still a little fuzzy, in other categories. And so it is one-time money unless there is some legislative action that turns those disparity aid categories into permanent funding streams. And so the recommendation, and certainly not a binding recommendation, but one of the recommendations coming from the state is that districts look at that amount of money as one-time money to use for things like infrastructure or projects such as this. So if you took that almost 1.4, you have this building project, which is 1.13, and then you have the article for the engineering and design work that pretty much uses up that one-time money for things that you might not normally be able to fund.
Colleen first. All right, Neil?
And as we discussed, Lisa, at the facilities meeting, no means no. If these articles fail, 2 and 3, you cannot use that money that you're talking about to pay for them.
Well, it is adequacy, so it wouldn't pay for these, but we'd still have that money. It would just decrease our tax rate even further.
No means no.
I understand that.
That's right. Any other discussion on Article 2?
Just my last. So, this year we're asking for engineering dollars, right? If that goes through, then we're asking for construction money or a bond possibly, or some shape or form of financing after that. If we don't continue, in my opinion, if we don't move this forward this year, there's not going to be a great time in the next 3 to 5 years. So if we don't ask now, then we won't know. The worst somebody can do is say no at this point. But there's not going to be a better time in the next 3 to 5 years to continue on with this.
Thank you, Betty.
The environment in those classrooms, if you haven't been in them, in the hot weather they overheat, in the cold weather they're cold, and all year long you have little rodents and mice that crawl up in, and get into stuff in the rooms. They're just not a good environment. Get a cat, yeah. That won't help with the heat and the cold, though.
Nick?
This also kind of points to one of my other concerns. It directly related to this, but also the direction the board's going with the building the new schools. In the study that was proposed, from what I read, the assumption, and also from the discussion that we had, I forget his name. I'm sorry. Kyle was that once we invest in new schools or new expansions of these schools, there isn't going to be any significant investment in infrastructure required for these buildings. And I don't think that's true. I think over the course of paying off of these buildings, you're going to see significant costs that arise in dealing with putting on new roofs and maintenance. I did not see that in the study.
Yeah.
And so to say that we're going to put this off until we get the new schools and then we're going to have this huge block of time where we don't have to spend any money so we can address needs at the high school, I don't think that's the case.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I think Kyle did address that. It's not that these, new schools are going to need anything ever, but it's not going to be within the next 10 years. These are going to be brand-new buildings, state-of-the-art buildings. That's going for at this point, so no, it shouldn't need a new roof. Within the next 10 years, the parking lot shouldn't need to be redone once we redo these buildings. That's the whole point, is that instead of going to the taxpayers every year and saying, we need more money, we need more money, we need more money, we need more money, let's just do it and be done with it, and then pay it off. By the time it needs work, it's not gonna be the way that it is, because as a board, we should be allocating that, some type of a plan, that we'll do a parking lot here and a parking lot there. It should all be allocated at that point, because we'll be starting fresh. And that is all in his plan and all in that budget.
Let's remember
that
to
book.
stay inside the scope of Article 2. And Article 2 asks us whether we want to do work on this building. A little over $1 million worth of work on this building over summer. Nick?
I'll hold my points on the other discussion. I think it's important that we continue our upkeep of any infrastructure that we plan to have remaining in the district. Even setting aside everything else, we still have infrastructure that we're going to keep, and we need to maintain that.
All right, any other discussion on Article 2 before we vote? I see none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Any abstentions? We have 2 opposed. That was Neil and Rob. I saw no abstentions. Moving on to Article 3, this is the article asking for $250,000 for engineering and design work as a result of the feasibility study.
Move Article 3 as written.
Second.
I get the second from Winston.
Guys.
Winston. All right, and the motion was from Scott. Discussion? All right, go ahead, Kristen.
Sorry, little levity. And I already did point this out to Janelle, but since the motion is for as written, this article was typically for maintenance, so there's one sentence that I think should be updated so it's not as confusing. It says, "It will not lapse until maintenance projects are complete," or June 30th, 2023.
Until the project.
So I assume, Janelle, you're already updated.
I did change it already, but the copies had already been put in the packet, so
Right.
it is all set.
Okay.
What's the new wording?
Oh.
The copy, but it will say, will not lapse until the project is complete, or June 30th, whichever is earlier.
June 30th of 2023?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that clear to everyone? All right. Nick, did you have your hand up?
Yeah. I was just going to say, I'd like to echo what I had said as a private resident, I guess, in public comments. I didn't know if the opportunity would come up here, so I think this is premature. I don't think we have the justifications that we need to sell this to the public. And I would like to see that work done prior to this.
All right, Neil?
Shouldn't it read now as amended then? Because I'm sure the old copies that are floating around look just like this one.
This is just a draft.
It's draft.
I know, just making a point.
Are you taking a friendly?
No, I'm going to ask a question.
Okay.
To kind of respond to Nick's point, I think the part of the reason why we took the path we took at the last meeting has a lot to do with the timing of state aid and our narrow window of opportunity to both apply and to be awarded funds to support the projects. And so we felt like we needed to pick a path because we need to have plans for a path in order to file the request to the state for the aid. If we don't pick a path and we don't develop a specific set of prints, then we cannot apply for the funding. That's my understanding of it. Maybe someone in facilities can say it better.
That is true.
Nick?
I just want to make sure I'm not bogarting here. From my understanding, we also chose a path that wasn't recommended, but wasn't the first choice of the person who performed the study. I believe it's $4 or $5 million more expensive than adding on to the Southern School, to Troy School. Am I correct in that? Can anybody correct me there?
Go ahead.
So the way, my recollection, the way we worded that is, and you are right that Robbie said earlier, there is a potential for $4 million more in state aid if we built on the Troy site.
On the Troy site.
Our decision last meeting included or left open the opportunity if we decided to build on the Troy site, but we're going to look for alternative locations along with that. So it didn't rule it out to do that there.
All right, Rob?
Nick, I would also disagree with your point that we haven't done an exhaustive exhaustive research. We have spent money on H Alternative to come in and do structural look at. We've done some drilling at a site, and now we just had an architectural firm spend an entire, essentially academic year and do an exhaustive, comprehensive look at building, demographics, while at the same time keeping in mind the potential of state aid, looking at traffic. I mean, we looked at everything. I think it's really difficult, somewhat to Neil's point, to nail down a cost analysis when you're talking about a project that could be 3 years out before, it ever materialized. But my recollection was that there was some pretty strong ballpark numbers associated with each option. So I don't know what else the board would want in terms of research. I mean, we spent a year as a board to do it. Now the timing has lined up such that we need to get this. I mean, the voters can say no. There's no question about that.
Lisa and then Nick?
Yep, I have two things. One is to remind the board that we have submitted a letter of intent to the Department of Education. It was due by January 1, and we had to have a project identified in that letter of intent in order to be able to submit that letter. And that makes us eligible then to apply in July. If the board were to change the decision of which project to move forward with or to not support the engineering and design warrant article, or if it fails, then we won't be able to apply for building aid. And I think, Brian, you alluded to that. The next opportunity for us to address that would be in many years. So that was point one. Point two was, and I was going to project this, but I don't want to disrupt. Last year, the total warrant was $34,032,928. Okay. Yep, 34,089. We haven't talked about the proposed budget yet, but if all of the four items that the board has discussed and we've shared, the SRO, the guidance counselors, and all of the stipends, are included in the proposed budget, and all of the items on this warrant are included in the warrant, that brings the total warrant to $35,819,904. We have $1,395,151 in one-time adequacy aid, which brings the total warrant down to $34,424,753, which is an increase over this year's warrant of $391,825, 1.15%.
Nick?
I guess I have 2 points now, too. From my understanding, adequacy aid isn't going to impact towns equally, though. So the taxation that each town will see isn't going to be simply the same as last year. That adequacy aid is going to affect each town in a different way. So, for instance, Fitzwilliam and Roxbury, the total budget may be roughly equal to last year, but we're still going to see tax increases that we have to talk to our citizens about in that way. And to address what Rob was talking about, I don't think that, I think when we get to deliberative session, somebody's going to ask, at least one person's going to ask, what's wrong with the existing schools? How much would it cost to bring those schools up to par, to what we want to do?
We have those numbers.
We have those numbers.
That's
The report.
That's what I saw in the report. Maybe I have an old version of the report, but what I saw was there was a constant figure that was put in for each year. There wasn't a detailed breakout of what we need to do at each school.
Yeah, there is.
It definitely is.
Okay, so maybe I have an old
Very
first
detailed,
version.
H.L. Turner. It was a couple years old.
He used H.L. Turner as reference.
So those are the individual building studies that we had that we had performed. Was it last year or the year before?
Year before.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I don't think that, I think those were just rough estimates from like a 1 hour walkthrough or something.
Just,
All right, Brian first, then Lisa, and then Rob, you can respond.
I'll defer to Rob first, and
Okay.
then I would like to.
gentleman from Swansea will take your time.
I don't remember what I was going to say, so
All
go
right,
ahead.
Rob.
Just the approach, because I think this is important to understand. The approach was to look at Mount Caesar as being the school that we have most updated. And so getting any dollar figure associated with other schools was to get it to the Mount Caesar standard. Okay? So some of the information from H.L. Turner was used in cooperation with the studies that Kyle, that Barker and Associates did. So I would say that, that's a much more refined number than a couple years ago when H.L. Turner did it. But it was with the idea of getting each school to the Mount Caesar standard.
All right, any other discussion?
I had my hand up.
Go ahead.
Lisa's first point, she made several, but her first point was she had to turn in something by January 1. We can make revisions to things we turn in, I'm sure. We made an awful lot of revisions to every submarine that's running.
All right, any other
We were
discussion?
building this up.
This is on Article 3. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question about that then. If we put forward, what was the exact thing that we put forward for the project to the state, Lisa?
I'm trying to, let me pull up the.
Letter of intent.
Yep, let me pull
Right,
up,
well,
it's in the packet.
I understand it's letter of intent, but for the project that we are supposedly spelled out, what was that project that we wrote?
Can you direct us to the letter of intent in the packet?
Yep, you have in your packet, they're not numbered, sorry, Neil. The building aid letter of intent form, and it's very brief, but we're required to specify what the project is, which is option 5 that was discussed in the feasibility study. We had to anticipate when the district may approve a project or a bond for the project. We anticipate that. Again, this is all hypothetical, but in order to be in the queue to even put in a full application, we had to submit this. So the anticipated approval would be 2021. Anticipated total cost, not including aid, the aid would come off of this, is $26 million. Anticipated start date, we put as April because we would start some of the planning at that point. And anticipated complete date is very probably much too soon, but again, this is what we were advised to put in just to get the ball rolling of 822.
Now in section B of that, just for the people that are listening to this that don't necessarily have this document.
Yep.
Does that spell out anything like where the exact locations of the schools or right?
Not at this time. We don't have a location identified for the new build. That's part of the process. It doesn't make any sense to search for property if you don't know that you have the voters' will to pursue it.
It's a great question, though.
Yep. Thank you, Nick.
Right. Go ahead, Brian.
You know, I think my last point here on that really goes to your comment, Neil, earlier about compelling information on why to move forward now, lacking this cost savings analysis, of staff consolidated in 2 buildings. I think, my point of view, from all the information that we've gotten so far, there was more than compelling just with the structural cost of upkeeping all the buildings we have now versus the plan that we've moved forward. So I think the additional study would only enhance what we're expecting, to see as future savings for the district to do that. But in my opinion, what we've seen now just from the construction savings there was more than compelling to me.
Well, last meeting, we picked one, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying, we don't know what the answer is to pick one. I don't know, but maybe you didn't turn it in as what we picked, I don't care. I think it's not the right one, but all I know is we haven't studied it.
To have a consolidated southern school. All right, so I'm going to call the question on Article 3. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Right, yeah, abstention was from Nick. Article 4, this deals with $240,000 for maintenance and repair work at all of the district schools. Is there any detail to what's included in this 240?
Yeah.
Move Article 4 is written.
Second.
The second from Betty.
Yep.
Questions outside of the detail while we're looking for that?
I have the detail
It's coming around.
that you gave us.
Yeah, it's coming
Oh,
around, but you
gotcha.
can read it if you want.
MRHS carpet, the auditorium, 17,000. Cutler AC for the top floor, splits, 35,000. Troy gym roof final with snow guard, half was previously done, that's 62,000. For Emerson, replace windows with energy efficient, half this year, that's 52,000. Also for Emerson, secure vestibule entrance, that's 24,000. Gilsum, heating and cooling is 50,000, for a total of 240,000 altogether.
Any additional questions on this? Seeing no questions?
Oh,
No.
I did have one.
Go ahead.
Just little question. It says for Emerson, replace windows with energy efficient half this year. Would this be the first half or the second half? So this is the first half. Okay. Thank you.
So, if I may, although I'm, made the motion so we could get into discussion, this is the one that makes less sense to me. From an overall strategy perspective, I realize it's much smaller dollars, and certainly carpeting in the auditorium, it's in this building, that sort of makes sense. But, the work at the elementary schools, until we understand what's going to happen in the long-term planning, that feels like it could confuse the voters.
Hey, let me
Yeah,
speak
Rob.
from facilities.
Go ahead.
And my facilities brethren, please. Facilities has spoken about this a number of times. In fact, about a year ago, we wanted to put a hiatus on all spending until we knew, right? And then we started looking, I was one of the big proponents of that. And we were looking at it and saying, all right, if it doesn't pass, we're going to end up putting ourselves behind the 8 ball. Mm-hmm. With that said, some of the bigger ticket being, over 100,000. I thought Dave and Janelle did a very good job restraining themselves from large capital projects in schools that could end up, should this move forward, being closed. But there has to be some level of maintenance, begrudgingly, okay? Some level of maintenance done just in case. I yield. I like saying that.
Even,
Uncle.
even if we go forward on this plan, doing these maintenance projects would make the properties more sellable. If we were to sell them, I'm sure energy efficient windows and half of a roof would probably be appreciated.
All right, Nick?
And even if the construction of the new schools goes forward, it's still going to be years
Yes.
before that takes place, before those kids are in there. So you can't tell kids at Emerson, families, well, we know that we need a secure vegetable for the security of the students, but, you know, tough. They're going to wait a few years, and the kids in Troy can spend years in a gym with water all over the floor. You know?
Yeah, I'll just say, I'm not commenting from the perspective that any of this looks to be frivolous. It's more when we think about warrant articles in plain English, this is one that will probably confuse people on the surface of it, because they'll be trying to understand, why are we considering work on buildings we're considering selling?
All right, any other comments, questions? We'll call the vote on Article 4. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? That's unanimous. Article 5, appropriate $1 to the Special Education Expendable Trust Fund. This is with the understanding that it could be modified at deliberative if necessary.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All right, so that came from Brian, the second from Rob. Questions?
Placeholder, right?
Placeholder, yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the next one is a proposal to discontinue the 2009 School Building Capital Reserve Fund that was created in 2008.
I'll make that motion.
All right, from Brian.
Second.
Second from Scott. Questions? Rob?
Just an explanation of what this means by dissolving this. What does that mean?
I think that's what Janelle wants to do.
There's a couple pieces. I can answer that question. The trustees of trust funds felt that that capital reserve fund has a similar purpose to the maintenance expendable trust fund and only has about $3,000 in it. So they had requested that we consolidate. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'd almost like from a English, what do you guys say it?
Plain
English. I think consolidate's the key word. Eliminating, it makes it confusing. Like, all right, we're going to try to raise money to build a new school, but at the same time, we're closing it and not understanding what's housed in those funds. We all do. So I would just highlight the word consolidate.
Well, I wanted to clarify, I had sent these articles to DRA, which I like to do, for them to look over and point anything out. They said we can't actually transfer money within that warrant article. We could vote to close it out, but we would have to have another warrant article to then move that money into, which would make it more clear
Lisa?
if I add another warrant article. But I wanted to let the board know, I just received that word from DRA today. I could create another article if that's what you
So
like.
as it's phrased, we can list this?
Right,
All right, Brian?
but it's $3,000.
Just my question, so if the request for the capital reserve fund for the vehicles gets voted down, and then we vote to close this account that we're going to be consolidating, the one we're asking for, where do we stand then? If we vote to close
No, it's not the one we're
second one?
establishing.
We would still have the maintenance fund of 2005.
Right.
Would be standing open.
Is there any reason that we couldn't put $3,000 into the article or in the plain English wording we'll explain, right, what the amount of money is?
We've got,
If we added another warrant article, it would need to have a dollar amount in it. So yes.
I think I heard you say that it's necessary for us to have like a 6A or a new 7.
Yeah.
Yeah. Betty?
well, when we worked on the plain English version, for Article 6, we didn't realize we had to have two separate ones. And so we put, in an effort to simplify the funds, we would like to combine the school building capital reserve fund with the school building maintenance fund.
That's essentially
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
The
So
goal
I
is-
don't know if we're going to need to change it if we end up with 2 warrant articles there, but
Our goal is to.
that was our thought when we worked on it last Friday.
I think,
Well, if we made
Just
another article, we
combine.
could use that statement for both.
Right.
Right? It would still be a true statement.
Exactly.
True, okay.
All right, who is the motion maker?
I was, no, Brian was, I was the second.
Brian, would you take it as a friendly to see if the school district will vote to discontinue the 2009
Yes.
school building capital reserve fund created in 2008?
Period.
All right, so that's accepted by the motion maker and the second to discontinue. Only to discontinue, no mention of transfer. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, so now we're going to consider a 6A or a new 7. Okay, in this one, we'll say funds accumulated, interest to date of withdrawal are to be, of the school building capital reserve fund are to be transferred to the school building maintenance fund established in 2005.
Are we going to reverse those?
I was just going to ask that.
Vice versa. Sure.
would the transfer come first and then the
Right.
discontinue?
Yep.
No?
No, you would discontinue, and then, they didn't give me the exact language, but it says the school can add an article to put monies into the school maintenance fund with said funds to come from unexpended fund balance. Because that money would go into unexpended fund balance and then be put into the maintenance fund.
Oh, it's
It
not a
would be-
direct transfer, I
It's not
got
a
you.
direct transfer.
Okay.
Right, that makes sense.
Can we say with the understanding that the funds will become available due to the closure?
You could put it in the plain English,
Oh, boy.
Not in the warrant itself.
but the warrant article language is specific.
All right, we haven't taken a motion and a second on this yet. Can you please state how you propose that the new warrant article would be written? Yeah, you, Janelle.
I don't have that.
All right, so it would be something along the lines of Article 7, accumulating interest, said funds from the school building capital reserve fund with accumulated interest to date of withdrawal should be transferred to the school building maintenance fund established in 2005. Right?
No, because it goes into unexpended fund balance.
Okay.
It would say something to the effect of, to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate 3,000, whatever the dollar figure is at the end of December 31st. I can get that number from the trustees. From
But we're not raising and
unexpended fund
appropriating.
balance into the school maintenance fund.
Nick?
It's $3,000. Why do we have to worry about having a separate warrant article to transfer let's just close the account, put $3,000 in the general fund.
All right, was that a motion?
We don't need a motion. We don't need to create a separate
It goes
article.
into the unexpended fund balance.
You just need
Whether
to,
you choose to put it into another fund is your choice.
so you could just, that first sentence would be all you would need, and it would go right into unallocated fund balance.
There we go.
Article 6 with the first sentence already passed. We've had some discussion on what would have been the new Article 7. It resulted in nothing, so we're moving on to the actual existing Article 7 to see if the school district will vote to establish a district vehicle expendable trust fund and to put $50,000 from unassigned fund balance into that fund.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, that was Brian, and then Rob. Discussion?
Yes. The language describes up to 50,000 from its unassigned fund balance, if any, remaining on hand. So that's help me understand, are we talking about when we would put money in and where the money comes from, or how we would withdraw money?
It's how you will fund that fund.
Where it comes from.
Okay.
We would
and
have to have at least $50,000 remaining at the end of the year.
up to 50,000, we'd have to have
That's
at
why it
least
says up
$1,
to.
right? So what if we don't have $1? Does the fund exist with no cash? I mean, I don't think we're tracking in that direction or anything. I'm just asking what happens if we don't fund it in the year that it's approved.
I'd hope that Janelle could set $1 aside.
What if we only have $30?
Saying it has to come from.
Janelle's pay.
Do we still establish the fund if we only have $30?
And it's saying it
Yes.
has to come from unassigned
Okay.
fund balance. You'd have to have money left.
Okay, so then we would have to take a motion, if this passes, we would have to take a motion by June 30th of 2020?
No, you would have the warrant article.
But how would we determine how much money to put into it? Because it's up to 50,000.
Up to 50, right?
But how do we decide?
If you have 50,000, then you are committing here that you would put 50,000. It's only less than 50 if you don't have the 50,000.
Got it.
So this comes first before anything else we would want to spend the unassigned fund balance.
Yes.
Got it.
Right, Nick?
I'm hugely in favor of this.
Okay. Yeah. Anyone else? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Good, 7 passes. 8, to establish a school grounds expendable trust fund. This is different because it's outside of the schools themselves,
Make a
right?
motion.
Brian, and the second comes from Kristen. I heard Kristen first, I'm sorry. Discussion. Was that you, Scott?
Yes.
Raising one finger?
Yeah, so I'm reading the optional if there is insufficient and how Article 7 will trump Article 8.
Yes.
Yes, that's,
Yep, okay. Would we be at liberty before the end of the year to take a vote of the board to determine how much would go into each fund, or is it Article 7 trumps Article 8? Okay.
Yeah.
And did DRA talk about this
It's
in any way?
required to do it this way. If you have 2 articles
For fun.
that fund from the unassigned fund balance, you have to prioritize them.
Got it. I guess I'd ask the board, do we all believe that, the vehicle expendable trust is more important than the school grounds expendable trust?
Nick?
I would say yes, because I think if we're talking about vehicles that may potentially transport children, or vehicles that are used to clean up during storms, I think that plays into a safety role in the district, and should trump.
I agree with you.
new
Just wanted to
playgrounds.
ask the question for the group.
I think this can also be a good selling point that the board can talk about, is that this will hopefully provide some stabilization to these sorts of things, to these sorts of expenditures that we may normally have to either really take a hit to the operating budget or come ask for this giant lump sum of money to purchase new vehicles or to make these improvements. It's a nice way to provide stabilization to the district.
All right. Any other comments, questions? All in favor of Article 8 as worded?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right. Article 9, to see if the school district will authorize indefinitely until rescinded to retain year-end unassigned fund, general funds not to exceed in any fiscal year 2.5% of the current fiscal year's net assessment. Nick? Well, let's have a motion in a second first, and then we'll discuss.
Move is written.
Scott and Rob. All right, Nick?
I think this is really vague when a taxpayer is going to read this, and I think you're going to have a tough time selling it. And I think if you make these trust funds that have specific purposes with specific amounts each year, that's more tangible to people to understand. This one's going to be more difficult, and it's open-ended, and I think it's going to be perceived as a way for the board to simply hoard cash, at the end of the year.
Betty?
Janelle, didn't you say, though, this was something, there was a new law, something that came from the state that allowed us to do this?
It's always been available to the towns to use, and a lot of towns do use it in order to avoid the spikes and dips in the tax rate. And so every year when we go to set the tax rate DRA asks if we had adopted this, and so we hadn't, and I didn't know if it had ever been brought to the board since school districts were allowed to do it. So I just wanted to bring it to finance and the school board to let you know about the opportunity, and it's up to you whether or not you want it in there.
So,
Go ahead.
so if we had $1 million left over, okay, just for easy numbers, 2.5%?
So this is, the wording is actually based on the appropriation, which would be the total appropriation minus grants, the adequacy aid grant. So the example that we are using is the tax rate that was set for this year. The total appropriation was $30,805,292 minus adequacy of $10,286,783 equals $20,518,509. 2.5% of that is $512,963. So the school board could vote to retain up to $512,963 this year. You could have chosen to do that.
So it's unlikely that we're
Just
talking about $1
real
million. Okay.
example of how that would work.
Now, if you had a lot of money, you could spend it in the budget for the end of the year. Hold it, and this way taxpayers can see that it's 2.5%. If it's available, it will be sent back and reduce the tax rate.
I don't think that's what that's saying.
All right, we've got a little bit of sidebar going on here. So louder?
I don't think that's what it's saying, Lynn. I think we're talking about that 500,000 would not go back. It would be held.
It would be held.
It would be used to reduce the amount that we'd be collecting for taxes for the whole district.
Well, it would be used to offset for the next year.
It's a gimmick. That's all I mean.
Well,
All right, Nick first, he had his hand up.
So it says right in the article what it can be used for. It says it can be reused to reduce the tax rate or for emergencies to be approved by the DOE. How does this work with like cascading year to year? If we set aside 500 grand one year and then the next year, it happens to be that we do really well and we don't have these giant spikes in insurance and we have lots of leftover money next year. Are we going to still retain that 500 grand the next year?
no.
So then it gets released in that year. You may
That's
see your
how it
neighbor.
offsets the tax rate. It always gets released the next year unless it's used for emergency purposes. And then at the end of the next year, if you have balance, then you would make that same determination.
So a lot of this could, if you guess wrong and say you set aside 500 grand this year and next year, anticipating that next year you're going to have some large expense or whatever. And the next year, it turns out you don't have that large expense, but you also release that 500 grand. People are going to be like, yeah, this is great. We got these super low tax. So you can actually, by guessing wrong, introduce volatility into it as well.
We have the option to hold
Right now, they have no return unless the school board, votes to reduce the tax rate by using money. Surplus fund or cash fund.
Is there anyone else asking to be recognized? On Article 9, all in favor?
Actually, I'll ask a question. Has Community Relations drafted any plain English on this yet?
Yes.
Could we hear how that's described?
Which one is it, 9? This article shows that the state allows districts to retain year-end unused funds up to 2.5% of the current fiscal year's net assessment for a contingency fund.
I want to tweak that a little bit
Yeah,
because it's not a separate fund.
right.
For emergency purposes, rather than contingency fund. Nick?
And I assume, Janelle, that though what the DOE considers an emergency is probably a very strict list of items or areas, right?
It is very strict. I did ask them because it
It won't
came
let
up
you
in a
in.
different meeting, and they said that the
Is that
only
a
thing
view
that
only?
they could remember it being used for emergency purposes was a septic that had gone bad.
Right.
Yep.
Some sort of catastrophic infrastructure failure or something.
Right.
Well said.
All right. Anyone else? Kristen?
So right now, the unused funds automatically goes to reduce tax rate, isn't that right? 'Cause
Yes,
we-
in the current year.
In the current year. Okay, so
Yes.
this would be the fall.
This would be retaining it so that it would be available the next year.
Ah, okay. Any other questions, clarification? Well, let's vote on Article 9. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Aye.
All right, so I think I heard that from Nick and Betty
I said no as well.
and Kristen.
Can we please have roll call vote on that one?
All right, sure.
Kristen?
No.
Wynn? Neil?
I'll vote no.
I can do it.
I was gonna let the voters decide, but
Nick?
No?
Brian?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Betty?
No.
Colleen?
Yes.
Christy?
No.
Scott?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes?
6.476 yes, 4.646 no.
All right. And that brings us to Article 10, to receive and approve reports of the agents, auditors, and committees. Any questions on this one?
Move 10 is written.
Second.
All right, and that was Scott, and the second from Winston. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Article 11, traditional, listen to the opinions.
Moved as written.
Second?
Scott with a second from Nick. Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, so we've got all of our articles approved except for the first, and that is,
Jill?
No.
Janelle?
Could I get clarification on Article 6? So we're just taking out to be transferred to the school building maintenance fund?
Right.
We're going to close?
Yep.
Okay, and not,
Created in 2008, period. End of warrant article.
okay.
It's first
I
sentence.
just wanted to make sure.
Super simple.
All right, let's do operating budget before we do draft warrant articles and planning budget.
Okay. I was going to project, but that's going to require more movement. But I think we can do this because you've all seen the numbers already. So just as a recap, the original preliminary budget without the resource officer, the guidance counselors, the academic stipends, and the extracurricular stipends, without the 970, was about 2.88% higher than this year's voted budget. It was $32,835,537. If you include all four of those things that I just listed, that number shifts to $33,119,903, which is an increase of 3.77%. It's a little bit different from when we saw this at the Joint Budget Committee because the SRO number went down after I met with the chief and we looked at the numbers and the cost share.
Just a point of information for me.
Yeah.
Are we still talking about part-time?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
So with the 970,000, the total would be $34,089,903. If you wanted to remove any of those individual items, I can tell you what the differences would be, but that's sort of your top end if you include all four of those items that we've talked about over the course of the year.
please read the final number again.
With the $970,000 for nutrition, it's $34,089,903.
Just for a point of clarification, where are the guidance counselors scheduled to go if approved?
This would increase Troy and Emerson to each have a full-time. Right now, they share. And this would increase Mount Caesar to 100% and Gilsum to 50%. Right now, Mount Caesar is 80% and Gilsum is 20%. And Cutler,
Nothing to the high school?
no. Cutler already, we added a social worker to the high school this year.
All right, we need a motion on the 34,089,903.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Rob. Any other questions? Discussion.
Which number did she?
Nick?
I'm sorry, you've already, I think you've already said at this meeting, but on paper, what is the difference to last year?
So on paper, before you consider the adequacy offset that I talked about earlier,
Right.
this year's operating budget, just disregard my last statement, this year's voted budget with the collective bargaining agreements and the vans incorporated, because that moves into operating, is $31,916,927. And that does not include the $970,000 for pass-through. But the increase over this year's budget altogether is 3.77%.
So what's the difference in the two numbers that are going to be in the warrant articles that people are going to see and compare?
So this is the operating budget. The default budget will be set by the budget committee. Well, both these numbers will, but the budget committee will set the default budget. And I tried not to bring too many books, so I didn't have to carry too much. So I don't remember the default number. But it's, do you remember, do you have it with you?
I may.
The draft default number. So those are the two that they'll see. The default's a little bit less than this, but it is still an increase over this year's budget,
Okay.
I believe.
Does anyone know the default?
Thing I didn't bring.
They're looking for it right now.
I'd like to know that.
Right, because before we can officially approve Article 1, do we need to know the default so that we can fill it in?
You don't typically approve Article 1 until after the budget hearing, but you always approve a preliminary or a proposed operating budget amount prior to the budget committee meeting so that they can make their determination about both operating budget and default budget at the hearing night. They do it after the hearing.
All right, so the intent of this vote is to approve the proposed operating budget of $30,089,903.
34 million.
34, yeah.
And that's before.
That's before the 970.
No, that's, the 34 million is with the 970,
Gotcha.
because that's the number that has to go on the warrant with the 970.
Right, yeah. So that's the number that'll be filled in on the X's for Article 1.
No, because that's the
Right.
default. This will
So-
replace the 33,805 in the draft.
Yeah.
Three, four, comma.
089.
089.
and
903.
loose change.
Yep. All right, any other discussion on this? So we're not voting on Article 1. We're voting on the operating budget, our opinion of the operating budget. All right? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
That was Kristen. All right. Let's talk about the plain English version of our warrant articles.
got a hand up.
I'm sorry, Lisa?
Yep, nope, just real quick, the default budget is approximately, there were some adjustments made from this at the last budget committee meeting. So without the 970, the default budget was $32,281,463. If somebody has a calculator handy, add in the 970 to that. But that is a 1.14% increase over this year, so. For comparison.
33,251 and change.
Could you repeat that?
33,251 and change.
4763.
Thank you.
All right. So in discussion of the warrant articles in plain English, this is how we want to portray the warrant articles to the public in words that are easily understandable to them. So do we have a copy of these?
She has it on her computer from when we worked on it the other
It's
night.
hard for me to get into it, but I'm trying. All right. I think this is it. Did I get it?
So I don't want to complicate
Okay, I
things,
have
but
it.
we can end up getting finicky over wordsmithing in this moment. Would it be helpful to maybe email the file to someone who can project, pick it up a little later in the agenda?
Alternatively,
I'll print them.
our,
Are you looking at next agenda timing?
yeah.
If you email it to me, I can print it for everybody.
So deliberative is on 2/1, yeah? Mm-hmm. We have a meeting on January 21st. We can take this up on January 21st, really, without
And then
much
just have copies
consequence.
printed.
Yeah.
Yeah, just,
Thank you.
yeah, we'll get them done in
I think
advance.
that is a great idea.
Yep.
Can you send those
We
to
changed something.
Janelle?
Yeah.
All right, let's just make sure that in the packet for January 21st, we have printed copies of the warrant articles in plain English, so we can all look at them ahead of time. Policies for second read?
Yes. Thank you. All right, the first policies that we have up for second read is JIC DAA and GBEBB, Employee to Student Relations. This is not a change to the policy, it is a reclassification only, so it's housekeeping. We're looking to reclassify JIC DAA to become GBEBB. I know that's a lot of letters. But the long and short of it is that this is a policy specifically directed to employees. It's in the wrong book. We're taking a recommendation from the New Hampshire School Board Association to make sure that it's listed in the right place in our booklets, and make sure that it's directed specifically to employees. There's no changes to the language.
Motion to accept.
Second.
All right, so I'll take that from Brian. Colleen was the second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Good. JICL?
Okay, so JICL and GBEF is responsible computer and internet use. We actually, broke new ground with some of these policies maybe 6 years ago. And, now there's more to it in the NHSBA book. But what we found as we've gone through recent scenarios in our district, that there needs to be both more comprehensive and consolidated language. So Superintendent Witt actually brought forward a draft of a policy that Jim O'Shaughnessy assisted SAU 29 Keene with. So we don't do this often, but we're not actually looking to stay beholden to the New Hampshire School Board Association version, which is a series of policies and maybe a little clunky to read. Administration really likes this policy that Keene uses. We had multiple back and forths with the superintendent. So the committee met, redlined a bunch of stuff, thought about it, sent it back, and we did that, I think, twice in both directions until we landed on, what everyone believes is the right thing for our district. At the same time, we would be retiring policy GBEBD so that we're not listing similar language in two places, and over time one gets out of date, so we're consolidating here too. So the motion from the committee is to update current policies JICL and GBEF with the sample provided by the committee, and retire policy GBEBD.
Motion to accept.
Is there a second? Second from Winston. So we're going from a 2-page policy to a 7-page
Yes.
policy?
Because we're also consolidating language from this other policy that we're retiring, so we're pulling it all together, but we're also clarifying a lot of, what's the appropriate response regarding social media and how teachers are connected with students, and making sure that we're addressing all things.
So this will be included twice, in the student book and also in the employee book.
That's right.
Good?
Nick?
All in favor? Oh, Nick, go ahead.
Does the scope of this only cover district hardware? I assume it's.
If you're using our network, so even if you are not using district hardware, but you're logged into our network, we have, when you sign into our network, there's a disclosure, and you are subject to our policies if you sign into our network.
It also connects to the recent adjustments to the New Hampshire DOE Code of Ethics, and how, even though not on district hardware or network, how our paid employees should act professionally.
Yep.
That occurs in both the grocery store and on the internet, right? So there's a code of conduct that applies.
So the reason why I'm asking this is it's employee and student. So does it cover students on their personal devices at home? Are they expected to follow this code of conduct?
If they're using their personal social media accounts for any type of behavior that would impact the school environment, then the policy applies. We have
Cyberbullying is an
cyberbullying policy would cover things of that nature. But if they're using their personal accounts at home for nefarious things that have nothing to do with school and have no impact on the school, we would have no recourse in those regards.
The only reason why I'm speaking to this is that I've had professional experience with people that, especially when you use language that's interpretive, like what's inappropriate or what's one person thinks is obscene that for another person, when they're at home and they have a private device, or even when they have a private device that they bring to work that's not on the school network, that's on, say, over a cellular service with their cell phone, right? And where I've had experience with it is some people that got into spats between company and employee about political things and what's obscene and what's not obscene. But so you know the type of environment that we live in nowadays. So there's a lot of, I think these are great policies to have, but just quickly reading through it, there's a lot of areas that are gray, and I think you may have a tough time enforcing them or actually having teeth to do anything with them.
Other comments? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Good. G, B, C, D.
Yes. So administration also asked us to look at our background investigation and criminal records check policy. So we've been working on this for a couple of months. The last time we touched this policy was 2008, so we're a little behind. Probably the most relevant change to the policy is that we will be adding routine background checks for existing employees to coincide with recertification. Today, or from past history, if an employee is going through the background check process during the application and hiring, and then they're with us for 10, 20, however many years, we've never gone back and checked background as to potentially reveal things that are happening, during vacation months, et cetera. So this feels like an important safeguard for the district.
Rob?
Is there any language in any contract or any employee handbook anywhere that mandates a employee of the district report certain criminal offenses or
Self-reporting is part
Yes.
of this.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, can I have a motion and a second?
I move the article is written, or not the article.
Winston, second from Colleen. Can you explain to us why it says the superintendent's protocol may include a list of felonies and misdemeanors?
Yeah, this was suggested language from NHSBA that we dicker and discuss the difference between must and may.
Or
Shall and may, yeah. And we opted for may because to list specific felonies and misdemeanors can get a little onerous, and you'd always be trying to update that. But also, if you list a very specific list and then something occurs that's not on the list, you have now locked yourself out of the box. So felt important to list this as the superintendent has the discretion to itemize these, but at a minimum, there's a series of them spelled out in the RSA. That's the baseline, and that's what we're running with for the policy for now.
Right, all right. It says background check every 3 years. It doesn't say to coincide with recertification. It just says every 3 years.
Yep. Practically, it will, for probably credentialed employees, we'll sync it with their credentials. For those that don't have credentials, we'll divide them and start a 3-year cycle.
Okay. Nick?
Sorry, I apologize if somebody asked this question while I was reading it. There's no automatic reporting method that's fed to the school if somebody has a criminal offense while they're an employee here?
Not unless it is one of the Section 5 offenses that would result in DOE action. So any type of, like a popular example, DUI, we don't get notifications of those. If they're, and if they are employed with a bus company, they may not get, they're required to self-report, and they may have other mechanisms for getting those reports, but we won't receive notifications of things like that. A drug offense, we wouldn't receive notification if it was a usable amount of marijuana. They wouldn't notify us, but we would catch it on a background check, and then we'd be able to follow through. We would be notified of any, child-related offenses, assaults, those types of things that would classify as a Class 5.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Lisa, go ahead.
I don't oppose. I just wanted to add, since we just discussed
Do
this.
abstentions first, and then
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
it passed. Go ahead.
We have, citing news, we have in district our own fingerprinting machine. So we can fingerprint on site, or we will be able to. We have final training coming up. And we won't have to have folks schedule appointments over at the Keene Barracks anymore. And I just think that that's going to expedite a lot. And I probably would not have proposed this language change if we didn't have the capability to do it in-house, because it probably would have presented a hardship. So excited to have that on site. I think it'll just make our onboarding process much smoother.
Who made the initial proposal for that equipment?
Patty?
Well, thank you. Anything else for policies?
Nope,
Okay.
that's it.
Board chair report. I just want to mention that we have some open board and budget and moderator seats. If you'd like to self-identify as somebody who's coming up for renewal and is running again, please let us know. A representative from Fitzwilliam? Is that you? Winston, are you going to run again?
And I'm intending to run again.
A representative from Richmond? I wonder who that could be. You going to run again?
Me.
You
But I
don't,
put it in the rooster.
okay, so you're not going to run again? 2 reps from Swansea for 3-year terms?
I think I'm one of them.
Will the 2 of you run again?
I'm planning on it.
Betty, Colleen? Yeah. 1 rep from Swansea for a 2-year term.
That's Christy.
That's me. I'm not sure. I haven't decided yet.
And I am the rep from Troy for a 3-year term. I will run again. Budget Committee, we're not sure about that. We do have a moderator up for 1-year term. Do we know the intent of Mr. Hutwalker?
I haven't heard otherwise. We typically will meet prior to deliberative, and I will ask, but.
All right. So it's important for folks who are interested in declaring candidacy to do that between 1:22 and 1:31. You can do that in the district offices, and there will be a place to sign up for candidacy right in the SAU office there with Michelle on the first level, just as you enter in.
What are the dates from when to when for us to do that?
1:22 to 1:31. Just a reminder to the board that we have a budget hearing on January 16th. That's a Thursday at 7 p.m. right here. And that is handled as a traditional budget committee meeting in lots of ways. So you can come and sit here as if you're observing the budget committee meeting. The hearing takes place just before the meeting. And if you have specific articles that you really want to stand up for, or you're just curious in what's going on with them from the budget committee's perspective, you can share your input there on that evening. It's been lightly attended by school board members in the past. I think it's important that we have at least a couple of people here. So can you indicate whether you intend to be here?
I'm out of town.
I'll be here.
What was the date again?
Brian will be here, 1:16.
Next Thursday.
Okay.
Does it get very heated with my children? Would it be appropriate for my children?
No, we don't have any contracts that are up, so it shouldn't
Are these
get
like the
too
movie
emotional.
previews, this meeting is approved for all audiences as opposed to?
It goes pretty
Well,
quickly.
but plus the hearing portion is not very interactive, so you wouldn't get people at each other. Your kids can come. Yeah. They won't think it's fun.
They love coming to the meeting.
Yeah, okay. All right.
It's free cheese.
I'll be here. Anyone else? I'd love to have at least
I'll probably
2 or
come.
3 people. Betty will be here and Winston will be here. All right. Good. Thank you very much, guys. And of course, the deliberative session is on Saturday, the 1st of February. The board meets at 9:00 a.m. And we'll do that in the teacher's lounge, same place that we had our non-public hearing earlier today. Colleen?
That's not on our schedule. I know it's on our schedule, but it's not on our calendars.
It's
We could get that on our calendars.
I will
other
add it right
important
now.
Dates, right, it did,
But
yep,
something just came out today.
because it's not in the month
It
of
says 8 a.m.
January,
light
or,
breakfast for school board administration budget.
It didn't come up on the committee calendar.
however, it is on the district calendar. It's on the calendars of all of the towns. I'm hopeful that you've checked with your towns also to make sure that the voting day is accurate and the locations for the voting days are accurate within your towns. That was a request from Lillian. We've got a little bit of time because voting doesn't take place until March, but sometime before March, you want to make sure that your town's communications to the public will say where the voting takes place, what the time is, and that it's all accurate. All right?
Well, it's on our warrant, so we need it to be accurate before March.
That's true, because when we come to the deliberative session, the warrant needs to read accurately. Yeah, thank you.
Don't worry about it.
All right, so if you're wondering where to look to verify that information, look on the warrant that we just approved. And it does say, for instance, Troy is voting at the Samuel E. Paul Community Center. If we were voting in the Troy School, I would have reason to say, hey, wait a minute, that's not quite right. And that's happened before. So just have a second look at that, make sure it's correct. All right, and I do just want to make some comment on the fact that we've been talking about school consolidation. I want to make it very clear that what we voted on as a board was to move forward with engineering monies in the warrant article to investigate whether we want to do some sort of a school consolidation. So there was a preliminary, Lisa, it was called a letter of intent, right? So we did the letter of intent, and we've just voted that we want to put some money forward to start drawing up some plans and things so that we can approve, so that we can apply for the money with the Department of Education in July. There are going to be several stopping points and opportunities for the public to give their input and to vote on this matter before anything actually happens. I just want to make sure that that is abundantly clear, that this board has taken years in the past to come to this point, and it will take at least a year into the future for us to make any substantive change. Right. And this is the board chair's report, so it's not really open to any discussion at this point, but you're welcome to mention your comments.
Did you happen to read the Sentinel Wednesday after the vote?
Mm-hmm. And what did it say?
It didn't imply that it was, something was gonna change. It said exactly what he made a motion for, to pick option whatever it was, 3 or whatever. That it would be a south school, a north school, and Gilson would stay open. Why didn't you respond and say that's not true?
The board is favoring the option to pursue more investigation.
Hey, it was an editorial.
I just had a question.
Yeah.
About your statement. What is it that we intend to have an engineering firm do? And what sort of engineering firm are we talking about? Are they drawing up building plans or?
Once we know that we have the money for the $250,000, am I right, it's 250 or 240?
250.
We'll ask them to give us a proposal for the best option to add on to Mount Caesar and to consolidate the southern schools, either at a new location or on the grounds of Emerson School or on the grounds of Troy School.
Who is it that we're asking?
It's Kyle, and he was clear in our last meeting that you missed that, the Mount Caesar expansion will be sort of an easy, he'll know what to do from a blueprinting perspective. But for the southern school, we will come to one of these crossroads soon where he can't proceed without a site plan.
So I thought Kyle was an independent architect.
We would need to, for the engineering and design work, we will have to go to RFP.
Okay.
And we would go to RFP with the option that the board has chosen, which is a south school on a new site. That was my understanding.
And there is at least one other architecture firm that's interested in bidding on the RFP.
So I'm hearing, this is just the point I'm trying to make, is I'm hearing like 5 different things here from administration, from.
Yeah, so if I may, just to slow it down, the The motion that I made that the board approved in order to file the letter of intent with the state was option 5, which calls for a consolidated southern school on a new location. Later in that meeting, Brian's motion was to say, if we cannot find an appropriate location, that we would still consider the existing Fitzwilliam and Troy locations as the next best alternatives. And we will have to come to grips with that in order to task any firm to develop a site plan and blueprints. Now, we don't have to tackle that now, but at the point, if the voters approve that funding to develop blueprints, then we'll be at a crossroads.
Further, I want to make it clear that I know we've been asked for a detailed cost analysis of how this will impact us into the future. Everything from how much is our heating and air conditioning or electricity going to cost to how much is it going to cost us employees. The assumption right now is that employee-wise, this is entirely cost neutral. We don't anticipate needing any fewer people to run 2 buildings than we do to run 4.
And option 5 also said Gilsum stays open.
No.
That was taken out of the equation.
Yeah, that was taken out of the
I didn't
language.
pick option 5, he did.
That wasn't in the final motion. And when we get to the minutes, we can talk about
It
that.
was in the editorial that followed it up.
So I appreciate that you're trying to provide clarity around the subject, but I still feel like there's a lot of confusion, whether it's between what's going out to the public, between administration and the board. I think there needs to be some more discussion about exactly what's going to happen with this money, because people are going to ask that question at the deliberative session.
We have a ton of work to do, and I read the email from Lisa Witt saying that in her spare time, when she was unable to relax after surgery, she started a website. That's going to be helpful for us. I think a lot of it, our community relations committee certainly has a lot of work to do. You're 100% correct that we need to be doing a lot of explaining here. Right. Brian?
On my list further down the agenda, but since it came up now, after, 2 things, Neil. We can't control what the Sentinel writes. So whether they choose to make it factual or not, I don't think we're in the position right now where we need to get down that road of rebutting what somebody chooses to write in the newspaper. Not at this point. What I do believe we need to come up with is a fact sheet, so when anyone chooses to put out any information, whether it be vaguely true, half true, or completely false, we can just refer to them to the fact sheet that we have all agreed upon are the facts. So we don't have to assign anyone to, explain what the board's position is. We can just assign someone to point someone to this list of facts that we know to be true, and then they can look into whatever they want to, and if they have questions, they're able to come back to the board here and get some clarification in a public setting like that.
I will also.
I was going to bring that up later, as we get through the meeting, but since we're talking about it now, that's what I would like to see as a fact sheet, so we can charge someone with being responsible for putting that out there, to do that.
Okay.
All right. I'll also respond that I did speak with the union leader, and I gave some clear information to the union leader about what our time frame is and what this vote meant to the public. And that was recorded accurately in the article that was placed into the union leader. Okay. Operations and superintendent's report.
So we've already gone over the letter of intent for the building aid application that was in your packet. I also included in your packet, I mentioned at the beginning of the school year, every other meeting or so, I would include one of our evaluation forms for various departments or employees. And so this particular time around, I included our related service providers. Those are your psychologists, occupational therapists, speech language therapists, and those assistants, everyone in that collective bargaining unit. There was a request for an update on the Mount Caesar traffic study. The site work has been done. We are waiting for the final report. As soon as we have that, we will make it available to the board. And that's really all I...
Question on that, Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
You said it's done, the report is done. Did it talk about the
No,
evening?
I didn't say the report was done. I said the site work is done. We're waiting.
Site work was done, but would it talk about the afternoon and the morning?
I don't have a report, so I can't comment on
What
what...
did you ask him to do?
Janelle?
to study the traffic patterns at the school, so I would assume that it's morning and afternoon.
Both of them.
I would hope so. I didn't,
Could I get a copy of the request, please?
sure.
We will all see a copy of the report, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. David was the one that worked with the company for it, so I'm not 100% sure, but I would imagine it would include both.
Nick, do you have a question?
Yeah, it's a related question, kind of tied into this, because I'm sure it may eventually affect it. Has there been any word about that intersection there, about making it a rotary or roundabout, and how that's going to tie in with the?
That's, the rotary construction will happen this summer, and how it will feed into, I don't, once we have the report, we can share that with them. But they had, we had met with the developers and the planners and engineers for that rotary multiple times to talk about our access and our concerns, and those were incorporated into the design. Barring any significant changes to entry and exit, it's kind of, I would think we would be able to work with whatever the rotary folks are doing, if we're just looking at shifting our traffic patterns around the school and how cars enter and exit. I don't know if we're looking at moving entrances and exits at this point.
Okay.
All right.
So that's all I really have, and I will have need for a brief non-public under C at the end of this, and then I would request if you could do the C first and then go back into A for your deliberations from earlier, and I'm probably going to leave at that point. I can't be in the deliberation room anyway, and if someone can just text me or send me a message with the results.
All right, program of studies.
So, in your packets, microphone's far away today. In your packets, you had the program of studies. This is for the middle high school. It has not changed from last year, except for the addition of 2 classes, and they're both kind of right in line. So one of them is a welding 2 class. We offer welding 1, but with the addition to the technical side of the building, we're going to have the opportunity to offer a welding 2 class, and welding is a popular class, and this is a way to get more kids into tech ed, so we want to offer that out. We're excited to offer something new in that end. And then the math department has really looked at what they're doing, and we have kids that really want to take an AP track but don't want to do AP calculus, and there's lots of ways to do AP in mathematics that isn't calculus. So we're bringing back a class that we used to have, AP statistics. Both of these classes fit in our current schedule. They don't need new teachers, so there's no cost to the district on this. This fits right within our course load. We just move classes around. The good thing about the AP statistics is it allows for a path that if you don't take algebra in 8th grade, you can still have the opportunity to take an AP course before you graduate. So kids coming in have that opportunity. So, typically the board just approves the program of studies so we can start scheduling.
Does anyone want to make that motion?
I would second it.
Winston with a second from Rob. Nick?
Just a quick question about, are we still doing dual enrollment type programs with the community college?
Yep.
And how does that, do they offer math as well? Just out of curiosity. That choose to do like community college calculus
Yeah, they can.
other than AP calculus?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Jeremy, I've had a few different parents and former students approach me and ask why we don't offer something to 11th or 12th graders around, a day in the life as an adult, balancing a checkbook, handling car insurance, health insurance, things that people
So that
need
stuff
to.
really does happen. I was talking with Bethany Maynard today. She's an English teacher, and she's getting ready to start a project very similar to about decision making as an adult, and looking at if you make this much money, and now here's your health insurance. We're gonna throw in a spouse. We're gonna throw in some kids. Now, how much money do you have at the end of the week? And they really are learning that. Also, kids have to take personal finance courses. They have to take courses that do look at that. So that is one of those things that it is happening in other courses. We don't have a specific course that hits all of it, but it is something that is talked about, and the school really does feel like they do touch on those things, and they do get to those things. This is a very popular thing right now for people to be asking about. It's
Kristen?
I was gonna say, I thought it was great that you do have personal finance and that you did cover those things, so. Because when I was
Nick?
reading this, I was very excited. It was good to read.
Nick?
I was always kind of I know home economics is usually, you know, sewing and baking, or, you know, that's what I did in home economics, but if you think about home economics, you think that would be something where a class where you would take advantage of some of those things.
They absolutely do. And it's not home ec anymore. It's family and consumer science. So they're really, they're really looking at budgeting and the cost of food and, okay, how much is this meal going to cost you to actually make after you buy the food and you divide it out? How many servings are you getting it? So I hear you, Scott. I can tell you it is happening. It might not be a specific class, though.
Yeah, I think, and I have a kind of a fun relationship with some recently graduated seniors from 1 or 2 or 3 years ago, and when I talk to them and say, I hear from administration that we do actually teach some of those things, and they kind of come back with a joke and a laugh, saying, well, they may have talked about that in my 4 to 6 years in the building, but if they didn't teach it to me in my last 60 days as a senior, I don't remember that. Right. So it's tongue in cheek, but
no, it's a constant conversation, though, and I think it's good to keep bringing it up, and I think it's good for us to keep thinking about it. It's something to talk about with the teachers, to say, let's keep thinking about these things, keep thinking about those real life skills, because that is something that we want to make sure that we're giving.
Yeah, so if I know tonight you need us to approve the program of study so you can move forward with scheduling, but I would ask in some unofficial way, unless someone makes a motion, that to me, it's similar to the senior project, the thing that we make the seniors go through for 3 to 6 months of their senior year. How can we make sure that they're ready to launch? I wouldn't say how to do it, but it feels like there's more noise and request for it.
We do have approved program of studies on next meeting's agenda. There's a little bit of time to talk about that, but I'm not sure what's going to change between now and then.
I don't know. Yeah, no, it shouldn't be. Like, we really want to start scheduling. I was really hoping you'd take a vote tonight, so I can get them moving. I'm not sure why it would be on the next agenda, but.
Isn't that what we just made a motion for?
The reason it's on next agenda is because our planning policy tells us that it needs to be on the second agenda in the month of.
Oh, got it.
Right.
Okay. So we're
doesn't
actually a
mean we
week
can't
ahead.
do it
We're a
tonight.
meeting ahead.
So do we have to table this motion?
No, we don't.
No, it's just, that's our deadline.
Got it.
I thought somebody just made a motion to approve the.
Yeah, we did.
You did, and you can.
You just have to have two-thirds.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Okay, that's what I was getting at.
Thank you.
I understand there are a few updates to the injunction and arbitration for Cheshire Career Center, but.
I've had my
what you got?
computer open here just in case, but I haven't heard anything from the judge regarding the injunction. I can tell you that Fall Mountain has expressed an interest as well at this point. And as far as the arbitration goes, despite proclamations at the hearing that, we'll be able to have the arbitration this week, we're right now already looking out to the end of this month because Fall Mountain has requested officially to be a part of the arbitration. And so their scheduling has to be taken into account as well. So I'm waiting to hear back. I got an email, I think yesterday, with some proposed dates at the end of the month. And so we'll see where that goes. But again, just to look at our scheduling timeline.
Is there any appropriate way for our attorney to make the judge considering injunction aware of the fact that this arbitration is indeed taking a longer time?
It could, but any communication between our attorney and the judge would be an ex parte conversation. I don't believe it would be appropriate. So I'm just going to reiterate publicly that the arbitration is looking like it's going to happen at the end of this month, if not later.
Thank you. And Neil, you had asked for the definition and usage of the non-public session D. Oh, that was you. I'm sorry, Scott. But we may indeed need to use non-public D if we want to consider the acquisition, sale, or lease of any real or personal property, which, could be the carpenter home. Could be anything else that we would need to negotiate. We would go into non-public for that. So with this definition here, are there any questions or further clarification that's desired on non-public date? Lisa?
I couldn't find any, I did go look into our law books that we all have. I did not bring it tonight because it was too heavy. And I couldn't find anything, and I searched around. There wasn't really much more clarification than this. There hasn't apparently been much case law to clarify what this means. But basically, if you're going to be negotiating or a price for something, or you're thinking about making an offer on something, and you don't want anybody who might have a competing interest to be privy to that information because it might drive up the cost or it might, hamper your ability to make a fair offer, then you can go into non-public for those reasons. It only applies to the sale or lease of property. It doesn't apply to other types of contracts as listed here. It's very similar to contract negotiations, really. When you accept contract negotiations, you do a non-meeting, but.
So if we decide to look for a parcel of land.
Yep.
And we're talking about what's on the market or strategy for any of that, that's appropriate to take in the non-public?
Yep. And not only appropriate, but strongly encouraged.
Yeah. We've come to the consent agenda, December 17th minutes. Let's do the public minutes first.
Take them as a batch.
Motion to approve?
Second.
12:17.
Yeah, so it says here December 17th, but the meeting took place on December 18th. Sorry.
Who is it?
The header and the minutes look okay.
Yeah. So there's a motion to approve by Brian and the second by Betty. All right. Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain?
Good. Before we do non-public, I think we also need to approve the unapproved minutes from November 12th, 2019.
Motion to approve?
Second.
The motion was from Brian, the second was from Betty. Questions or comments?
Is that the facility?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, so let's retract that, will you?
Yeah, those were included because that was where the Mount Caesar was discussed.
Okay, I apologize about that, guys. But we can move to the non-public for 9:50 PM, December 18th, 2019.
With the minutes as written?
The motion was Scott, second was Winston. Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Lisa, you had something?
I was just going to suggest you seal tonight's first non-public before you forget.
When we get to later tonight.
You can
Hey,
see,
from that last one, by the way.
you can seal it now because that first non-public already ended.
Non-public 12:18.
Okay.
Tonight's.
Public session.
Move to seal the minutes of,
But you still gotta finish the vote
We
on
do.
It's a different
public
session.
minutes.
It's a different session.
So right now, we're voting on December 18th,
Oh, sorry.
non-public for 9:50 PM. We have all of the in favor,
Aye.
Aye.
opposed, and we had one extension, that was from Nick. All right. Sorry, Neil was also an abstention. So now we're on the motion to seal the minutes for the
non-public.
earlier non-public C that have not yet been drafted. Non-public session A from 6:00 PM this evening. Those minutes haven't been drafted, but when they are, we'd like for them to be sealed. Is that clear?
Motion to approve?
Brian?
Seal them.
Motion to seal.
Motion to seal? Okay.
Go get 'em, ladies.
Second.
so we need to specify how long they'll be sealed.
I would suggest until the resolution of the personnel issue.
All right.
Can you be that vague?
Yeah, that is a time certain, so when it's resolved, then they could be unsealed. It doesn't have to be a date.
Duration of process?
All right, is that your motion? You don't have a second yet.
I said
Yes.
second.
Oh, Kristen's the second. All right, and can you read that back to us, Laura?
Yes, to seal the January 7th, 2020, 2020, 6 o'clock non-public session minutes until resolution of personal issue.
Personnel?
And can we say the section, it was, what do we, what was?
A.
Section A, which is personnel issues,
It's a
right?
dismissal of, yeah.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Good, all right, manifest?
Yep. I'd like to move the manifest in the amount of $1,456,974.33.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Scott. Questions? Rob?
I'd like to rename the manifest the Betty Tatro Manifest.
That's awesome. Any other discussion?
The Betty Tatro Memorial.
Oh, that's dark.
I don't mean that, but
That's what that means, though.
not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
Sorry, Betty. You knew what I meant.
It's a hangover from Barry Faulkner.
For next
When he
meeting's
talked,
agenda,
yes, me too.
we need to go over the logistics of our deliberative session, because quite often we have one member of the board read each of the warrant articles, sort of explain or propose the warrant article. We want to authorize the CRC on the warrant articles in plain English, and we also want to allow them to amend them if necessary after the deliberative session if there are small tweaks that need to be made. We want to go over the consolidation timeframe for the elementary schools, but we may rename that to fact sheet, because I think that's what Brian was asking, is just for a fact sheet, and Lisa has a website started, so we'll talk more about that. What else for next meeting's agenda? Rob?
I feel awkward saying this in public session, but I wonder if we should have a discussion about contacting Gilsum Selectmen about their representation at these meetings,
Okay,
or
all
lack thereof.
right. Anything else?
I have a question about the fact sheet idea. I think it's great. I wonder if Facilities is planning to meet anytime soon, and could we actually ask them to assemble that document as opposed to us pitching it around?
I support it. Thank you.
All right, and if it has not happened by our next meeting when we discuss it, then we can entertain a motion to send it to facilities and instruct them to create a fact sheet. Okay.
Brian, were you hoping that that would be assembled in time for deliberative?
Yes.
In which case it may be more appropriate for, or might be appropriate for
Right, so
someone in
Facilities
Facilities
is
to put a
doing it
draft
next
together.
As far the consolidation timeframe, Lisa's already made a commitment that we can have something like that, just a rough draft by next meeting.
I did.
Well, then, thank you.
Well, you said I could
And
put
I
it
already
on
thanked
next
Rob.
meeting agenda.
You're right, I probably did.
And you didn't delete it from next meeting's agenda here when you had a chance to, so it's there, like it or not. Let's see, were we gonna do parent engagement next meeting? Okay. What else for next meeting?
Do we,
I'm not.
Did, but Jeremy said he had more to share.
No, I'm not. I guess I'm not clear. I'm clear on that. I'm sorry. What specifically was the question to follow up with that?
Right,
I've gone
so,
through. I don't know what.
Parent engagement.
there was a phase 2. How can we get parents to come out?
I mean, I think what I was saying is, that would be something I'd really want to engage with community relations, or figure out how can we put the message out, but I don't know that it's another big board discussion. I'm happy to have it if you guys want it. I just don't know.
If nobody's actually asking for it and I misunderstood, then there's no reason to put it on the board agenda.
I think the question was, last meeting we had talked about the big uptick in the junior high engagement here this year, right? So my recollection is, instead of beating our, going through this whole motion about figuring out how to get people who aren't engaged, better understand why the people that change their minds and this year decided to become more engaged on their own, why, right? Because if something happened that changed your mind, I would like to just work on that and then grow that instead of continuously trying to focus on people who have not been engaged, are not likely to be engaged, and then sit here and continuously talk about what we're going to do to go back to those people again and again and again. So something changed, right? I would like to know why.
We had a blip this year. Yes, we had one bit of data. We had more parents show up to parent-teacher conferences this year than we have in the last 3 or 4. Yeah.
Nick?
Maybe it's not the point you were trying to make, but I think it's one of my responsibilities and my role on the board is to try to figure out how to get more people engaged and involved. And I don't think that should be the exclusive focal point of our efforts, but I think it should be on the table for things that we try to do. I would like to see us engage with administration and better understand the community and the struggles that they face to get parent involvement and how we can help them increase that.
But not on the next meeting's agenda, right? So.
Well, I'll reach out and bring whatever information I can about why we had a higher turnout to.
And you said it was middle school, right?
Yeah, that was the one place that we saw a difference.
Yeah, Jeremy, I guess I would comment that, we even put in the minutes that we didn't want this to be one of those topics that just sort of talk once and then it dies on the vine.
Right, but you got to understand from my perspective, coming back at it every couple of weeks, it's not really, I'm not sure what to add to it. Some of this stuff, it's not hard data. We're trying to figure out what made parents want to come to a parent-teacher conference one time. So some of it, it's just, to come back to it really quickly, I guess I misunderstood what we were doing.
No, I'm with you. What I'm wondering is, do you have ideas, rather than putting it on the agenda, do you have ideas of how we should try to dig deeper? Is it for you to dig deeper? Is it for one of our committees to dig deeper? Who would tackle something?
I left misunderstanding. I thought we were going to dig deeper into Brian's question, and I thought I was going to engage with CRC after we got through
Budget.
Plain warrant. So I misunderstood. I did not realize that was the request. So I apologize. I thought it was for me to engage with CRC.
All right, so the question is, do we take next steps between now and the next meeting, or do we talk about it at the next meeting? What are the next steps?
I'm happy with what Jeremy just stated his understanding was, right? We get through warrants in plain English, and then we come back to, because we still have time before the next round of conferences.
Absolutely.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I'd really like to engage with CRC on this, because I think it's a really important, interesting topic.
All right, anything else for next meeting?
I have one more question. When are we getting another update on the interpretation of the data from what we talked about last meeting, the test scores?
Second February meeting, we'll have the updates.
So this is after, excuse me.
The second February meeting will have the interim New Hampshire SAS testimony.
So this is, from last meeting, I wasn't at last meeting, but I did read the minutes and the documents. You said you're going to get together with the principals to discuss.
That's what I was thinking.
Right. And get that feedback, and so that we'll hear back from that sometime in February.
Say it again.
Remember why the scores varied dramatically from school to school?
Oh, yeah.
Cohorts.
Yeah.
Meet with the principals.
Yeah, I'll bring back
that.
some preliminary ideas. So you remember, anyone who works with numbers, we're collecting this data, and, we don't really have a trend, so we'll tell you what we're seeing, and I think what we're going to find is very much what I said last time. Are we collecting the same information, in our attempt to collect good information, have we truly understood what proficiency should be based on? I think that's the conversation we're gonna have. But yes,
Well, yeah.
I have a principals meeting before the next meeting. Yes.
And my concern was to better understand, is everybody doing the same thing? Because, I stated last time, if every school is collecting data differently, then I don't think we can compare that data.
Yeah, and you'll remember,
Can we pause for a second?
Yeah,
Jeremy, are you missing your education committee right now?
a little bit, yeah,
And them?
I am.
Would you be open to folks who have specific input or questions about this contacting you directly so that you can have a better understanding of what we're looking for as a full board so that
I'm always open to that. Feel free, and I'll bring it as part of the report. So let's do that report. Let's follow up on that data, and we'll call it that. And I'm gonna come and talk about the data we're collecting, and be honest with you about this is the first year we're collecting this data, and we're trying to give you, instead of saying let's do this test because tests always change and that's a very frustrating thing, we're trying to come up with a way that we can always have apples to apples and just understand that calibration is not instant, that this is a chance to give us the apples to apples. But
I have no
I think very
problem.
much we're not collecting the same data, and that's
So-
part of the problem.
lacking an education committee, I have no problem talking about things in more detail at the board meeting, just not in this section under,
Okay.
Gotcha.
Makes sense.
planning the next meeting's agenda.
Can we add that to the agenda? I know we're going to come up on committees here only in like 5 meetings from now, but policy committees also talked about, well, we don't have an education committee to refer this to, so what do we do with it? And it's come up 2 or 3 or 4 times, so should we put the education committee back in play?
I don't like referring from committees.
Or can we just leave that to next board chair?
That's your call.
All right, we'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting. All right, public comments. You guys hang out here. Thank you so much. Not a peep. Nothing. I feel like it should be a parade and we'll toss you candy or something. Thanks for being here.
However you would like to do it.
Now we gotta go to
We're gonna take a recess and then we'll go into non-public.
I have one question.